Well, everybody, here's the deal. I'm Noah. This is Becky. If you don't know us, we're hanging out today.
Yeah.
It's fun. So we run student ministry here at Calvary.
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing this for a while.
A long time.
Long time.
Calvary, yeah, long time.
Coming up on 9 years.
9 years of Calvary. Yeah, what in the world?
It's great.
Yeah.
I love it. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so we're hanging out, and we have just been talking about this new year, and just kind of like where we want to go, where we want to be more intentional, really.
Yeah.
And something we talk about is like, how can we be better at reaching parents and talk about what we're going on, and then, or what we have going on, and then also like, can we give some opportunity and some insight on like why we're talking about what we're talking about.
Right.
And potentially gives students like some understanding in that, and even some like going deeper opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? Are you feeling the same way on this?
Yeah. I think with parents, it's like we know that we have your student for like an hour and a half, like not even that long. And so it's like, how can you as a family like continue this conversation? So we do emails, but it's just not enough. So we're trying to see like how we got to where we got to, because also we only have like 10, 20 minutes to teach. And there's so much you could do on even just one topic. So it's like, okay, what do we want to cover? And how do we even get to that specific topic? Even though you and I, we spend like hours going from like here all the way down.
Right. Yeah,
so we want to bring you in that process.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And we know too, like the way we consume, both being parents as well, it's like there's not a lot of time to like read emails and actually do it well. So it's like, can we do like podcast, YouTube, audio, or just something that's like, give it a listen, have an idea, and like we know we only have kids for a night, so we want more involvement throughout the week where families can jump in and grow deep and do stuff together. Yeah. And I'm also a person who's like, if I know why we're doing things, it's so much more helpful to dive in and like invest into it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So with all that, this is shot number 1. We don't know if this is going to work, if this is what we're going to continue doing,
but we're going to try it.
Let's give it a shot. So the hope is that this is kind of a weekly situation of just, like I said, getting our thoughts, kind of getting an idea of like, this is why we're going the direction we're going, and this is what's going on in our hearts.
Yeah.
For everything, right? For all the student ministry goodness. Yeah. So with that, we're hitting prayer.
We're hitting prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we like to do prayer every January. Pretty intentional about starting the year off. We've done it the last 2 years. I think last year was more like evangelistically driven. So we hit prayer for one of the nights. Yeah.
But like the idea behind January is like, let's do stuff. Like, let's not just talk a lot. Like, let's practice and grow in those kind of areas.
Right, because we do a lot of talking.
We do too much talking.
So it's like, we gotta actually do something. Mm-hmm. So prayer, we're here. And so every week we have a 5-week series. Every week you have some teaching time, and then you have some practice time, and then you have debrief time in your small group. And so, yeah. So week 1, we hit kind of the like, what does it look like to pray? Mm-hmm. And just really like trying to break down walls of like, I pray for meals, or I ask God for stuff, right? Or even like we were talking to some of our junior seniors last night of like, if I fold my hands, I don't feel like my prayer counts even, right? Like all those misconceptions of like, we have to do X, Y, and Z in order for our prayers to be good or to count or feel like we can even pray. They're going to work.
Right, exactly. God's going to hear them. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to break those walls down and be like, and just talk through, what does it look like to honestly just talk to God?
Yeah.
And what does it look like to grow? We talk a lot about relationship with Him. Mm-hmm. So how do we grow that? And a big part of that is conversation and just being real and honest and like dynamically communicating, not just one way, like asking for stuff, but just telling God how your day is or what's going on or thanking Him for what's around you.
Yeah.
So that was kind of week 1.
Yeah.
Setting the table, right? And then this week you're up.
Yeah, I'm up.
Where are we going? What's happening?
Yeah, we're talking about like how to actually listen well to God. So if it is a relationship, then it's 2 ways, right? And so I share, but I'm also like, I want to hear from God what He would have for me. And so how do we even prepare ourselves to be silent before God and be able to listen? Because I think that's a huge struggle, right? It's like, life is so busy, my head is so busy, like what do I do, and how did people do that in the Bible too? Mm-hmm. So is what we're going to be talking about. Is like, what are some pictures of that? We see that Jesus, like, He went away all the time into just desolate, silent places. Right. So it's not like, oh, okay, you have to move, go out into a cornfield and just be by yourself. It's like, how could I do that even at my house or during my day, or what does that look like? So talking intentionally about that.
Yeah. Are there any like specific stories that you're hitting on?
Okay, so ones that are coming to mind that you're like, okay, so the first one that was like Moses, Exodus 3. So when Moses was shepherding, he sees, he comes upon the mountain of God. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire within a bush. As Moses looked, he saw the bush was on fire, but it did not be consumed. And then Moses is just curious, which I also appreciate, because I think like if we come and we're listening to God, but we're we don't actually want to hear what he has to say, then it's for sure never going to happen for us, right? Because it's like, okay, well, my heart has to be curious to like, okay, God, what would you think about this? What do you think I should do with my friends or with my family or all of that?
So like the motivation for the quietness and the
right.
sitting, like we need to actually be listening,
right?
And like ready to listen.
Yes, because you totally talk to people who you think, oh, I'm going to tell them my story, and they'll listen, and then they just like are not even paying attention to it, right? And so it's like, no, we don't want to be that way. We want to be intentional about listening to God, even though because He's not like Noah here in the flesh, we can hear His voice. It just takes a little practice, right?
For sure.
So when Moses comes to see the bush, he asks him to come closer, but take off his shoes. And so just the idea of like having, like the word would be sacred spaces, like what does that look like? How to prepare your heart, again, like with the intention, okay, I'm here to actually listen to God. So that's one. The other story is Elijah in 1 Kings 18. So that is about Elijah, the chapter before. He is in this huge battle with the king who's all against him, and God sends fire down from the sky and kills all these people. But then the king is like, I hate you, I'm going to kill you. And so Elijah runs away, right? And it's like super scary. And so he goes into the wilderness and he's like, just kill me, I don't want to live. And so God meets him there. He provides first for like his food, he makes him sleep, all these things. And then he turns to speak to Elijah. And so when Elijah chooses, he wants to feel the presence of God, right? And so when God shows himself, there's all these like super loud things that happen first.
Yeah.
But that's not God, right? And it's not until the end when there's a whisper then, and that's where God is in those whispers. So it's like, okay, if we're going to be intentional about it, we have to deal with all this noise in our life and then be listening closely. Like I can't talk to Noah while I have the TV and the radio and I'm in my car and I'm paying attention to my baby who's screaming in the back seat. Like that's not going to happen, right? I can't hear what he's going to say. Anytime she's screaming, I can't hear anyone else's baby. So it's like, how do we close down the noise in just everyday life, right? Like whether that's just parents and friends or putting your AirPods in, you're just choosing to have noise. It's like, okay, I need to still my heart and be ready. And then we're going to practice that, really.
Yeah. So how'd you get there specifically, right? There's examples of like Jesus getting away. There's talk of like solitude and being quiet before the Lord and all that. Like how did you get to like these are areas we need to hit for students specifically? I
feel like with Jesus, you see that he does it repetitively. So that I think that's like still a key point. We want, like you can't listen to God just one time and think like that's it for your whole life, right? It's like you have to continue to choose to make that an effort. But I think that for us, it's more of a matter of like, how do you listen, period. If we're going to practice, we want to practice the listening part. And so that's how I chose these two, because I felt like, one, it's like Moses extra. I have to come that it is like this cool opportunity. I get to speak to the God of the universe, and he's amazing. And I can't believe that I can have a conversation with someone like that. And like admit like God's just so much bigger than I ever imagined. He can do everything, and come before him and like be kind of excited about that opportunity. But then I also need to like take care of my own stuff, right? I have to take care of all this other noise and be more intentional about listening to that still small voice.
Right. Yep.
So.
Yeah. I feel like something that too that I've been sitting on is like that God is still active. Like reminding myself it's not just like the God of the Bible that existed thousands of years ago. It's like, no, God, like Jesus rose. He's on the throne. He's active today.
Right.
And I think part of that like stillness is that reminder of like, God can talk to me. He is moving around me. Right. And like, but we need to get quiet. We need to remember that he can still show up. Even if he hasn't in a while, like whatever that looks like, right? Like just some of those reminders I think are huge.
Yeah, and I think I've been struggling with the like, okay, how to describe when that God does show up. Like, was that sound like, right? So like for my own life, it's been specific words or like people he's brought to mind, or that kind of thing will show up in those moments of solitude, but it's really hard to describe to someone else, like, this is what you're looking for.
Right.
So I think that's where I still am, like, need some more study of, like, how to help facilitate that piece of it.
Yep. But the front end of it is just, like, that awareness piece. Like, be open, be ready, and, like, don't be, I think we're so cynical of, like, oh, that was just me. Like, I was just thinking that. Or, like, no, like, God's not really telling me that, right? That song was just a coincidence. So it's like the awareness of like, maybe that is God speaking to me in this. I think is really good too, right?
Yeah, because you're open to it. Because God, like, I've sat with people and we've prayed and we've asked God and he totally has revealed stuff and you're like, okay, I'm not sure if this is really that important, but I'm going to talk to you about it. And then you're like, oh my gosh, that's like huge for me. So God can, and you're totally right. We just kind of are like, God's not going to do that.
And I think that's a culture piece with like students and just like all of us in general. It's like we are so cynical and we're so easy to just pass off the supernatural and God's movement to think, oh, it's a coincidence. Like we're in control of that. We want to explain that instead of like, if we're looking for it, right? And if we are aware of it, like how can God show up in those places?
Why do you think we are that way?
I think a piece of it is like, I think we have been almost like trained to be, right? I think like movie and TV and just like the supernatural and like all of those things we've toned down a lot. Or if you watch movies, it's like it's all explainable or it's aliens. Like there's no like in between of like God's really moving and showing up in this. So I think like that piece, and again, like information's at our fingertips all the time. So everything feels like it can be explained, right? Or I can do research on it and just figure it out on my own. Like we don't have room for God to come in and to be the one speaking and revealing because we're the ones who are speaking and revealing ourselves, like with what we have. Those are initial thoughts. I think there's more to it than that, but I think those are pieces of it.
Right. I would agree with both of those. I think it is like, I think we are either scared, like to admit, oh, I think I heard God. Because I think that also is kind of frowned upon when you're like, oh, I got this message from God. And I think people sometimes use that poorly, where it's like,
true, absolutely.
Oh, kind of crazy person. It lets people do weird stuff. So it's like, okay, what do I do if I do hear God too? It would be a whole other spin-off we could do of this that we won't have time to cover that night. But like, that would be a whole other conversation. Right.
Well, and that piece of like having space and openness to talk about it. Like, hey, I think God's telling me this. What do you think? Like, I think that community aspect of it, we don't really do, right? We don't talk about those nudges. We don't talk about those things. But I think like I've been in situations where I'll say something, like you said, and someone else in the room will be like, oh, me too. I've been thinking about that too. So I think it's that cultural piece like that of where we are at Calvary of like, can we get better at sharing, hey, God's showing up in this and encouraging each other through that and just opening our eyes to like what God could be doing and speaking through that, right? So, no, I think that's all good. Yeah, and I'm excited for this week of just like, we don't sit still. It doesn't happen. We're not quiet. I'm always listening to podcasts. Like, or having something on my phone, I feel like. So even just like the 15 minutes we're going to take to be quiet this week is going to be unique. It's going to be tough. It'll be good. And hopefully like students will experience something in that and want to continue it a little bit, right? Even if it's 2 minutes or like waking up and having a little bit of quiet, right? But just starting somewhere and getting going on it. With all of that, anything in mind for like, if there's parents or students listening who want like, what are some good questions to talk about at home or with friends or like continuing conversation that might be valuable on this topic?
So I think parents, if you aren't quiet, right, then there's no modeling for your kids to be quiet. So I think even for yourself, taking some time and being like, okay, this is how I do it. And so then it's a great way for you to practice. I think too, we're doing that week of prayer here at Calvary. And so if you want, that'd be an awesome time even for your whole family to come and just pray, because it is going to be like an hour of silence. And so there will be things to do, but that would be a cool step too. And I think just thinking through like how do you as a family listen to God? Like, do you invite God into big decisions that you're making as a family? And even decisions of like how you spend your money or how you guys are doing trips or who you're supporting financially, even through mission, or if you're going on mission trips or any of that, like how are you listening to God in those big decisions?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think you're right. Or even just sharing with your kids or sharing with your friends of like, this is how God has shown up in the past. This is how I've heard God before. I think like so much with parents is like, if kids see your authentic relationship with Jesus and how you've experienced him before, that's going to motivate them to want some of that. Or to be open to it, or to want to dedicate some time towards it. So I think like just being real and vulnerable and having space of like, hey, like how is listening to God? And then also questions of like, why do you have noise going all the time?
Right.
What's that all about? Is it because you get anxious when you don't? Is it because you just like don't like being alone with your thoughts? Maybe you've never thought about it before.
Right.
But just like I think asking those introductory questions and then sharing some heart of like, oh, this is how God showed up in those places. I think is really good.
Yeah, I think in all of this too, we have to give ourselves some grace,
Absolutely.
right? Because it's like,
we're not
this is hard.
Perfect. It's hard.
It's like 1 minute we practiced last week and everyone was like, oh, that's awful.
Right.
And now we're going to push you into 15. So
it's tough.
Even on like, it's okay, right?
Absolutely.
There's so much grace in like, you don't have to do this perfect and it's not ever going to be perfect. And that's good too. You're trying and God appreciates and sees and values your effort and all of it. So don't be discouraged. I think people get discouraged too. And if God isn't like, you should do this. And you're like, God probably, you know.
I gave you 15 minutes. You didn't show up. What the heck? Yeah, absolutely.
I'm done. I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a learned practice. That's what we have to practice today. Is like, it takes time to learn what he does sound like. What is your own thoughts? Like, how to get into the moment. So give yourself some grace.
Yeah. Give yourself some grace, y'all.
There you go.
There we go. We'll see how this goes. Maybe we'll be back next week. Who knows?
Who knows?
But appreciate y'all. Have a good week. We'll see you later.